A brand new Nintendo console launch isn't perfect without... Do me a favor and finish that sentence in the comment below, because today that's all we're going to be talking about. Nintendo launch lineups, that is, and we're going to be extra picky. Yes, everyone knows the launch window is technically several weeks long, but we're not bothering with that. Because at the end of the day, if you're buying a new console and your favorite franchise isn't on the shelf, it's cold comfort to know, technically it's still a launch game, like if it's a month late. Yeah, cool story, bro. Nah, no way. Today we're going to take a harsh look at the attendance record of Nintendo franchises over the past 40 years of console and handheld launches. Except we're looking at the exact date of release for each territory to prove once and for all who are the MVPs of Nintendo launches, and who went MIA after a few generations. So we better hurry up, because we have like 100 games to look at. So let's get a look at Nintendo's launch console lineups through every single generation. The very first Nintendo console, well, the very first one that mattered anyway, had only a measly 3 games, but it was quality over quantity. Donkey Kong was a monster arcade hit that was so dang popular, it saved Nintendo's fledgling American division, and it's still pretty dang fun if you ask me. Donkey Kong Jr. flipped the script. This time that darn Jumpman was the villain, and it was up to players to save Daddy Donkey Kong. And lastly, Popeye. Why? Because Japan loves classic American animation. Heck, Donkey Kong was originally designed to be a Popeye game. Yes, really. Now we're in America and the market is still scared following the 1983 crash, which is why this lineup is so accessory heavy. Super Mario Bros. Is hands down one of the single most important launch games in Nintendo history, proving arcade-fast gameplay could fit within a lengthy campaign. 10-Yard Fight is a pretty nondescript name for a football game, but it was already an arcade hit, which made it an attractive launch game. Baseball, on the other hand, might not seem that interesting to hardcore players, but it was designed by none other than Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto. Clue Land is some quality forgotten first-party Nintendo, mostly because it's a top-down single-screen puzzle game like Pac-Man, which was wavering in popularity at the time. Duck Hunt was based on the classic toys and shooting galleries of Nintendo's past, but these days it's remembered as this adorable light gun shooter. Stupid dog. Excite Bike is a Gen X staple, giving players chaotic motocross action that required careful maneuvering and even included a cool little stage editor. Golf is exactly what it sounds like, but it does include the early programming work of a young up-and-comer named Satoru Iwata, who is known for his ability to create nuanced physics. You know what? We're just gonna put Gyromite and Stack Up together because they're separate games that focus on the accessory Rob the Robot, who was created by the genius designer Gunpei Yokoi. Hogan's Alley is yet another light gun shooter with a lengthy history. In fact, it's rather surprising how many early Nintendo games straight up involve handguns. Ice Climbers would probably be completely forgotten if not for Smash Bros., as it wasn't all that well received in 1985. But personally speaking, I'm Team Ice Climber. Breaking out of the arcade, it's Kung Fu, an absolute banger of an action game mashing up the space shooter design of Waves with the early melee combat designed by Irem. Pinball is yet another Nintendo game made in conjunction with HAL Laboratories. And yes, that means once again this was worked on by future President Owada. You know, soccer is one of the most impressive sports games of all the launch titles. I mean, sure, it's slow as heck, but you got these big characters and some pretty good animation. Tennis was rather impressive back in 1985. You gotta remember, Pong was still in the public memory, and this was essentially a 3D version of that. Wild Gunman not only is a great little light gun game, it showed up in Back to the Future too. What, you gotta use your hands? That's a baby toy. Wrecking Crew is not a Mario game. It's a Wrecking Crew game. What's a Wrecking Crew game? It's kind of a puzzle game, kind of an action game, but despite having Mario in it, no one considers it a Mario game. Okay, let's check in. We've got one console down, so not much to say here, except ironically the Japanese and American launch games are completely different. That's right, those New York City toy stores weren't stocking Popeye or either Donkey Kong until months later. Go figure. But this goes to show how strategic Nintendo has always been when it comes to launches. Now let's see how many of these games can make back-to-back appearances. We're over in Japan with the Game Boy and Alleyway, which is essentially one-player Pong. See, I told you that was still popular. Although in this game, the paddle contains Mario, somehow. It's actually a pretty useless cameo. Wow, baseball with the back-to-back? But this was the peak of the sport's popularity in the latter half of the 20th century. And you know what? For a sports game on a tiny screen, it's surprisingly legible. Super Mario Land is here, and we're gonna say that's a back-to-back for the Super Mario series. This game is still a touch different, with exploding turtles and side-scrolling shooting sections. Yeah, Yakuman is Mahjong, which might seem like a simple regional flavor, but it's even more nuanced than that. This is the game designed to sell the Game Boy to old Japanese guys. Now, America didn't get Yakuman, but it did get tennis. Once again, it's a smooth-playing, easy-to-read game on the go, which was still a novelty in 1989. Another contender for the single best launch game ever, Tetris and the Game Boy's dot matrix screen were two puzzle pieces that fit perfectly together and then slowly blinked away. Okay, it's time for another check-in. To the surprise of absolutely no one, so far the leading franchise in all of Nintendo is Super Mario. Now, we're not gonna add Donkey Kong, even though it technically has Mario in it, as that's a distinct franchise. But with Super Mario Land, Nintendo has told the consumer to expect new Mario games with new consoles. Less obvious is baseball. Sports games were in a much different place, as it was popular for third parties to use the rules and design of real-life games like baseball because the concept is open to anyone. So let's keep track of Nintendo's first-party sports games in the future. Wow, we're in a whole new generation, but do not expect a larger lineup, as Nintendo saw fit to enter the 16-bit generation with a total of count them, two games. We're talking a three-peat launch with Super Mario World, yet again, one of the best launch titles ever, with over 70+ stages and extra snug high-flying controls. Also, it was a pack-in game. God, I miss those. And looky here, we have F-Zero, a perfect way to advertise the Mode 7 graphics, which gave the sensation of 3 dimensions. Now, over here in the States, we got both of those games and Gradius 3, a space shooter that should be good, but regrettably, this game suffers from slowdown. SimCity was one heck of a great value on the back of the NES. Instead of needing a whole personal computer, console users got this adorable little streamlined version. And Pilot Wings is the complete opposite of what most games are supposed to be. Sure, you're doing airborne tricks, but the blue skies, I don't know, makes it soothing, kind of relaxing. Alright, here we are for the check-in. Easy come, easy go. We've lost baseball, but we still have the Super Mario franchise 3 for 3, with the NES, Game Boy, and Super Nintendo. If you're a fan from this era, there's absolutely no way to have a new Nintendo console without a brand new Mario game, right? Surely that's gonna last forever, right? Welcome to the 3D generation, Nintendo. And fitting with the theme, Nintendo saw fit to give Japanese consumers a total of 3 games, one of which would absolutely never be released outside of Japan. Super Mario 64 is, again, I feel like a broken record here, but one of the very best launch games of all time, totally reinventing the franchise. Gone were the power-ups, now is all about exploration and huge 3D stages. Seiko Habu Shogi is the previously mentioned Japan-only game. Yes, this is shogi, which I guess is like Japanese chess, and exactly what would sell to older Japanese audiences. And Pilot Wings 64 is like the first game, except way more relaxed, which, considering how chill the first game is, makes this one a sunny, funny vacation on a cart. Alright, we're here at the next check-in, and unlike the previous consoles, the Nintendo 64 saw even less games in the West. We got Pilot Wings 64 and Super Mario 64, but this is where the reputation of Nintendo droughts began to take hold. But hey, if you gotta be stuck with 2 games, these are 2 real gems of the early 3D era. Plus, they're proven launch titles. For the 4th time, we're seeing Super Mario become the definitive launch title for the console. Surely we haven't seen the last of that, right? And talk about a dark horse candidate, Pilot Wings and its laid-back gameplay has once again taken a place right at the starting line of a new generation. And we'll be seeing it again in just a bit. Now here's a depressing fact for you. The space between the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance is shorter than the gap between the Switch and Switch 2. Yep, but we have an absolute ton of games to get to. Advanced GTA, or GT Advanced Championship Racing as it's known in the West, helped show off the GBA's improved graphics, as racing games would become much more common on handhelds. Akamajo Dracula's Circle of the Moon, or Castlevania Circle of the Moon as it's known in the West, was only the 2nd Metroidvania-style game in the entire series, but has since been written out of canon. Bakunetsu Dodgeball Fighters, or Super Dodgeball Advance, is yet another Kunio-kun game that centers on dodgeball, and the players that travel the world to become the champion. It rules so hard. Battle Network Rockman.exe, or Mega Man Battle Network, is a spin-off of the classic action platformer, now turned into an action RPG with one heck of a bumping soundtrack. Bokuwa Koko Kanseka is exactly the kind of simulation game you could only find in Japan. A procedure game about running an airport runway. Yes, really. Choo Choo Rocket was originally designed to show off the Dreamcast's online play, but this crazy cat-and-mouse puzzle game was original enough to thrive without the internet. Easy Talk Show Kyuhen is a 6-part educational game that showcases the audio capabilities of the GBA, with phonetic English phases and simple objectives. Oh, will you look who's back? It's F-Zero once again giving us the fast and flashy gameplay. Although the GBA was much more powerful than the Super Nintendo, it still replicates the Mode 7 visuals. Fire Pro Wrestling A is the perfect wrestling game, if you can settle for 2D graphics. Seriously, they straight up recreate other wrestlers, gimmick complete, teetering right on the edge of copyright infringement. J-League Pocket is essentially Japan's version of the UK's Football Manager. You don't play soccer so much as you guide the development and strategy of the team. JGTO Golfmaster Japan Tour Golf Game is a golf game, as the title would imply, ready to fill the gap since Nintendo no longer focused on sports games for launches. Konami Wawa Racing Advance is a nostalgic reminder when Konami had so many franchises they could fill up a whole kart racing game by themselves. Kurin is the first entry in a fantastic puzzle series. Here, you are a stick that won't stop twirling, and you gotta fit in some narrow hallways. It's just simple, great fun. Momotaro Matsuri is a Japanese RPG with big characters and colorful backgrounds, all centered around a carnival festival where unusual events begin to occur. Monster Guardians is one heck of a lost gem. Imagine Final Fantasy Tactics meets Lemmings, and a touch of real-time strategy. You already know just by looking at this if this game is for you. Mr. Driller 2, or Mr. Driller as it's known in the West, is a follow-up to the puzzle game all about our plucky little hero in colorful caves, which, constantly try to crush him. Napoleon is one forgotten strategy game in which players take control of the titular Napoleon, guiding his troops to take control of castles via the color of their flags. Weird. Pinobi Wings of Adventure is the kind of platformer designed for 4-year-olds, and yet it's so dang fun even older players can appreciate the huge graphics, like me. Play novel Silent Hill was technically the first follow-up to Silent Hill, months before Silent Hill 2. Well, kinda. It's more of a choose-your-own-adventure book of the first game that sadly never got translated. Power Pro Kun Pocket 3 is Konami's answer to the baseball gap left by Nintendo once again, and the bright graphics and smooth visuals show how far the hardware has come. We've got a 5x5x5 right here with Super Mario Advance. Although it's a bit of a half measure, as this is really Super Mario Bros. 2, aka Doki Doki Panic, aka Super Mario Bros. USA, but with some of the early bits of presentation remixed. Tweety No Hardy Party, or Tweety and the Magic Gems, is a board game starring those classic Looney Tunes like Bugs Bunny traveling all around the world with the roll of a dice, and it's kind of boring if I'm being honest. Winning Post for Game Boy Advance is exactly the kind of game that once again could only survive in Japan in the early 2000s, back when there was a boom of horse racing games. Yes, really. Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice Monsters is only a year or so after the animated show began to air, and a great bit of nostalgia before Yu-Gi-Oh! Took over every single lunchroom table in the world. Top Gear GT Championship is yet another racing game, and a welcome one because the GBA is when racing games finally got good on handhelds. Now let's switch over to America with the Ridion 3D. It's the latest version of a pretty weird idea, a wave-based space shooter except from behind, which sadly blocks the player's view. Rage Rumble Boxing is either a game that's been burned into your memory because of all of its marketing, or you've never heard of it, because this franchise burned bright and it burned fast. A top-down 2D version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 sounds like a terrible idea, but you know what happened? This adaptation rules, and it's shockingly accurate to the polygonal-based versions. Army Men Advance is yet another lost franchise that's centered on the tan and green Army Men toys of yesteryear. This 2D version featured big and bright models for the era. And speaking of forgotten, oh man, it's Earthworm Jim. He actually had his own TV show, and yet its early big-budget 2D platformers are mostly lost to time. At least we got to launch the cows when we could. Namco Museum is exactly what it sounds like. Classic Namco games like Dig Dug and Pole Position, but built for the ground up for the Game Boy Advance. Pitfall the Mayan Adventure was a reboot back on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. This version was best known for its expressive animation. And lastly, we have Rayman Advance, which is yet another port, although this version took screen size into consideration, so players get all the big characters without running into obstacles. Alright, let's do the check-in, cause man, that's a lot of games. So who's making the cut between console generations? Well, for the second time, albeit with a gap, we have F-Zero appearing date and date with a brand new Nintendo console. But of course, we're at the 5-time mark for Super Mario Bros. But let's be honest, it's not totally a new game. So why isn't it? Well, if I had to guess, it's because Mario had jumped to the third dimension, and we were still several years away from new Super Mario Bros. The GBA, as strong as it was, wasn't going to have the next 3D Mario. So Nintendo had to split the difference and make this quirky remake. Alright, stop what you're doing, because Nintendo is about to ruin the launch lineup that you're used to. Trading Mario for Luigi's Mansion, a fun little action puzzle game that was sure a change of pace. And say it isn't so, Sega, but yes, with the the death of the Dreamcast, the House of Sonic took Super Monkey Ball to the GameCube, which contained not only a Marble Madness-inspired single-player, but a robust multiplayer suite. And yet another lost franchise, the final entry too. Wave Race Blue Storm showcased how powerful the GameCube's hardware was by rendering flowing water at a solid frame rate. Now over in the States, we got way more games, including All-Star Baseball 2002, a franchise that continued to be made, but if we're being honest, it wasn't very full-featured, a common launch game trope. Batman Vengeance isn't a great game, but it is a great adaptation of the show, with the same visual style, but most importantly, the exact same voice cast, including the late, great Kevin Conroy. Outside of Activision's ballooning Extreme Sports division, Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX 2 took its own route, before producing one of the single most controversial sequels ever. Madden NFL 2002 is a pretty good little football game, but again, if we're being honest, nowhere near as beloved and remembered as the following year's Madden 2003. NHL Hits 2002, on the other hand, didn't need to be too complex, as it was all about slamming and shoving, all in pursuit of the puck on the ice. Maybe the most 2001 name ever, Tarzan Untamed, was a fairly straightforward little platformer, directed at younger players and based on the then recent children's film. There's no two ways around it, Star Wars Rogue Squadron Rogue Leader remains one of the most impressive launch titles of all time, rendering fictional space battles into believable and engaging gameplay. It holds up too, in my humble opinion. Hey, it's time to get some crazy money with Crazy Taxi. Wow, that hurt. I don't get to do that very often, which is a shame because this driving game is all about racing customers to product placement while Bad Religion bangs on. A Sega gem. Considered the end of a trilogy, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 was the final game to follow the classic structure until the fourth game broke into character-driven objectives and free roaming. Okay, it's time for the check-in. Can you imagine social media in 2001? A Nintendo console without a Mario game? Well, don't take this as a hypothetical, because we still had the message boards back then, and even Nintendo fans were annoyed by this sudden change of pace. Although many found Luigi's Mansion to be original and compelling, but after 5 whole launches, it's not unreasonable to have certain expectations. Heck, they delayed the Nintendo 64 just for Mario 64, but this time out, Mario could wait. So who did turn out for the GameCube launch? Well, surprisingly, Tony Hawk did a back-to-back with the Game Boy Advance and the GameCube. There was a time and place when Tony Hawk was the game that united casual and hardcore players. Heck, is there anyone watching this that has never played Tony Hawk? Seriously, answer below if that's you. Here we are with the 2-screen wonder that launched in America first, and what a get! Kicking off with Feel the Magic XYXX, a quirky Sega minigame collection with odd scenarios like puking up live fish. Spider-Man 2 is several completely different games, all with the same name. And this one is a snappy 2D platformer that features a good amount of web slinging, web sticking, and bad guy bashing. Asphalt Urban GT is yet another racing game, but again, racing games progressed graphically on the DS, creating a unique visual style that's sure to induce some nostalgic for some. Speaking of which, Madden NFL 2005 and the DS games were a fun little sub-series I always enjoyed, but for whatever reason, EA stopped making them a few years in while still producing them on the PSP. Go figure. What happens when a sim becomes a hipster? Why, it's the Herb Sims in the City, all about collecting cash and barely making rent, while, expressing your feelings, man. Hey there, stranger, it's Super Mario 64 DS, which talk about title gore, but it's accurate. This is a unique remake of Super Mario 64, now splitting events into different characters, and that choice, it was not well liked. Now over in Japan, we have Mr. Driller Drill Spirits, which is yet another entry of and fairly similar to previous Mr. Driller games. But you know what? The larger perspective is honestly a nice change of pace. Cool 104 Joker and Settling is exactly what it sounds like. Card games aren't really what many would expect as a launch game, but the DS attracted a wider audience. It's a nice way of saying old people. Digasso Band Brothers is a music game that I personally found bewildering to play, but the graphical style was big and bold. A real doctor drama, Kensu Tendu Dokuta had players guiding the surprisingly emotional patients back to health. A soap opera on the go. Mahjong Takai is of course a game centered around Mahjong. Sadly, I've not learned how to play Mahjong yet, so let me know in the comments where's the best place to start. Pokemon Dash is labeled as a racing game and an action game, but really it's just playing with Pikachu and a pen. An easygoing gimmick game, so if you expected Pokemon at launch, you've been warned. Saguaro Maiden Wario or WarioWare Touched is exactly the kind of bonkers weirdo gameplay that WarioWare players enjoy, like playing a joke book. Zookeeper is yet another port of the tile matching game that thrived on platforms for about a decade, but has been gone for even longer. Alright, it's time for the check-in. The DS is a break from tradition in several ways, but for the 6th time, Mario is back in a leading role, attempting to sell players on a brand new console. But look who's back. It's Mr. Driller. This is sadly the last time we'll see Mr. Driller, but hopefully he's out there somewhere. Drilling, presumably. Oh boy, it's motion control control time, and we have a boatload of games. Starting off with Avatar: The Last Airbender. Did it really benefit with motion controls? Nah, pretty simple beat 'em up. Call of Duty 3 was just before the franchise actually exploded in popularity with Modern Warfare. This was certainly an end of an era, before online multiplayer and zombies defined the generation. The grim adventures of Billy and Mandy follows the complex lore of the TV show. Just kidding. It's a crazy beat 'em up full of absolute nonsense and fits in line with the cartoon's humor, yo. Happy Feet doesn't really need an introduction. It's obvious what happens when you take disco music, Dance Dance Revolution, and penguins. Obviously, we're back with Madden 07, again a good Madden game that would be quickly replaced by the next generation's refined physics and defense, while the Wii got last-gen scraps. Sorry, Rampage Total Destruction is a 3D rendition of the classic monster smash 'em up, yet somehow a game that's been totally eclipsed by its own movie, at least according to Google. Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam is based on one of the most insane animated movies I've ever seen. Meanwhile, the game is pretty chill and direct, but, you know, a little limited by Tony Hawk standards. Here comes a new challenger. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess marks the first time our dear elf boy has made the cut for a launch date, but it certainly won't be the last time. Does Zelda make the perfect Nintendo launch? We'll see later on. But what about people that wanted even more first-person gameplay? Well, that's what Red Steel is for. A John Woo-inspired shooter that resulted in an even more bonkers sequel. Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz is yet another Marble Madness 3D game, but this is the first time we're seeing Super Monkey Ball since its launch title on the GameCube. Trauma Center's Second Opinion is all about operating on suffering patients, a franchise that still has a cult fanbase. Oh boy, it's the 500-pound gorilla, Wii Sports. Funny enough, it was a pack-in title in the West, but Japan sold it separately. There's been a long debate between fans about whether it was the right decision or if Nintendo threw money away. Let us know where you stand in the comments below. Rayman Raving Rabbids introduced the world to those crazy rabbids and their odd mini-games like drawing food to eat. Wait, why is he wearing the chef's hat then? I'm the one that's cooking. Monster 4x4 World Circuit is another racer featuring big trucks, but honestly, it lost out to another game with a very similar concept. Need for Speed Carbon isn't that game I was just hinting at, but it is pure mid-2000s with Fast and Furious type vehicles and drifting. Family. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 was the best dang DBZ game when it came out, or at least it felt that way, with a fun combat system and a gigantic character roster. GT Pro Series is yet another racing game, but even without the competition, it was poorly reviewed and quickly forgotten. Sorry. Excite Truck is the obvious racing game to go with. An extremely simple and straightforward racing game, but the presentation was a cut above, and it smartly used motion controls. SpongeBob SquarePants Creature from the Krusty Krab is a strange game. SpongeBob gets really edgy and races around. Are you sure this isn't a child's nightmare? If you were alive in 2006, you are aware of Cars. Sorry, that's just how culture works. A classic kids game for a generation. What happens when you smash all the timely comic characters together in a pre-MCU world? Why, it's Marvel Ultimate Alliance. For some, a great follow-up to X-Men Legends, to others, the start of another great franchise. Now we're over in Japan with Crayon Shin-chan, which is either the thing you already know about or are completely confused. And if you're in the latter, get yourself some Shin-chan anime. It's awesome. Inichi no Tatsujin is an entry in the Taiko Drum Master series, but this version was not fondly remembered by fans. Just being honest here. SD Gundam Scad Hammers is the latest in the surprisingly long-running SD Gundam series. There's just something about these adorable enemies of war that's just fascinating. One heck of a hidden classic, Elebits is a very basic first-person game that encourages players to go nuts and knock everything around in search of Elebits, to gain even more power to, knock around things. Super Swing Golf wasn't terribly well received, and it's obvious why. Wii Sports stole its thunder and included even more sports. Consider it bad timing on their part. And would you look at that? WarioWare Smooth Moves is back-to-back Wario in Japanese launches. It seems like WarioWare had a little launch run in this era. Wii Play might not exactly be the most complicated set of minigames, but with Nintendo first-party guiding the design, it had a refinement other launch games can't really match. Would you like to fly in a big beautiful balloon? Well, try a spin in Wing Island, a game that didn't review well in the slightest due to its limited content, but it's pretty. Tamagotchi Party On looks like a 5-year-old drew a board game and gave it life. It's one of the most chaotic visual styles ever to feature on the Wii. If Escape from Bug Island sounds seriously cheesy, that's intentional, taking influence from 1950s horror films and applying them to 3D exploration games. It's an acquired taste, but it is interesting. Alright, it's time for the check-in. No, your eyes don't deceive you once again. Again, Mario is missing from a launch lineup, but it was more than made up for one of the most popular sports games of all time in Wii Sports. Heck, it's one of the most popular games ever. And you know what? Let's count that towards Nintendo Sports. It's the first time we've seen it on this list since baseball on the Game Boy, so it's certainly part of that legacy. But for the third time, we have Tony Hawk present, even if it's not a numbered entry in the main series. But we also need to tally one for Excite Truck, which is part of the Excite Bike series, as well as Super Monkey Ball, and who could forget Madden Football? Sure, it's an annual franchise, but new hardware still requires a lot of work, so the Wii featured a very timely lineup. Can you believe it? We're at the very last dedicated handheld ecosystem from Nintendo. And yes, this is when digital games begin to appear, but for the sake of clarity, we're just gonna go with what was on carts on that day, which means we're kicking off with Bust a Move Universe, which was a 3D rendition of the classic puzzle shooter. Combat of Giants Dinosaur 3D sounds like a simple masher, but honestly, it requires a surprising amount of strategy and foresight to keep your dino fighting. No offense to all three Nintendogs plus Cats games, but we're just gonna combine those as one entry, which are French Bulldog, Golden Retriever, and Toy Poodle, updates to the classic Nintendogs virtual pet system, but in 3D, and with new friends. Surprisingly, this is the first time we've seen Pro Evolution Soccer with the 2011 version, previously known as Winning 11, and these days eFootball. Ridge Racer might be synonymous with Sony, but Ridge Racer 3D is a great reminder how perfect this series is on handhelds, even Nintendo's. Samurai Warriors Chronicles is a great game if you just want to mash buttons, rack up points, and look around in 3D. A great little follow-up to the Koei series. Super Street Fighter 4 3D Edition is a very weird little game. Seems like a slam dunk, but wouldn't you know it, Capcom got quirky with the game's tucked-away perspective. It's, interesting. Professor Layton and the Miracle Mask, back when you could count on getting one of these adorable adventure games every couple of years. Now, I remember buying a 3DS on launch day and no one else was there. Is this lineup to blame? I recall LEGO Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars being a fairly simple but fun little bash 'em up. And would you look at that? It's Madden NFL Football, back for its fourth time. Did you ever think of Madden as an MVP for Nintendo lineups? Well, it's almost catching up to the main man Mario at this point. Rayman 3D is certainly an acquired taste, and that taste is a handheld version of Rayman 2, which some consider the very best Rayman game ever. Sound off in the comments where you stand. Yet another forgotten franchise, Asphalt 3D was Konami bringing their nitrous-fueled racer to the Nintendo's new 3DS handheld. But these days, Asphalt is MIA. Hey, long time no see, but Pilot Wings Resort is the classic Pilot Wings gameplay, but now in 3D. And its color palette certainly fit with the turquoise blue 3DS. Oh boy, look, it's Steel Diver. Look, this little submarine game was just trying to show off the 3DS's cute little features, not unlike a toy. But even the critics weren't won over. Super Monkey Ball 3D is once again a straightforward variation, but perhaps too safe and easy, with some players losing interest in the reduced difficulty. And lastly, we have the criminally overlooked tactical strategy game, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Shadow Wars. Does anyone even remember this game? I know I do. Alright, time for a check-in, and personally speaking, I am shocked at how consistent EA has been with Madden. I always recall the annual release, but they've been a part of a launch day lineup for 4 whole platforms. Boom, as perhaps Mr. Madden would say. Pilot Wings comes out of nowhere with a new game after a decade plus in the dark. Once again, some fans were bored by the gameplay, but some saw it as a nice little leisure game. And Super Monkey Ball ties it for 3, which is appropriate given the third dimension. And this is the second time we've seen the Rayman remake. Should we count Rayman Raving Rabbids? Honestly, that's more of a spin-off than Rayman Advance and Rayman 3D. Likewise, we're not going to add LEGO Star Wars and Rogue Squadron 2, but it is interesting to see that franchise appear again. You know, I joke about how poorly the Wii U sold, but frankly, there's no time. And you know it's 2012 because we're talking about Ben 10 Omniverse, a top-down dungeon crawler that's, not great. Sorry, Gwen. Speaking of 2012, THQ was alive and kicking and releasing Darksiders 2, an action RPG near and dear to 8th generation fantasy fans. Funky Barn is a farm game, but unlike those rigid simulations, this one is all about getting funky. So, you can understand why it reviewed poorly. Just Dance 4 lived up to its name, having players, just dance. One depressing fact, this series is so old, some of its pop hits are now retro. Yeesh. My goodness, will you look at that? The Turducken Man is back. Madden NFL 13 has now nearly tied Mario in launch day appearances, with a total of 5. Boom! And unlike the previous entries, this is actually considered one of the best Madden games ever. NBA 2K13 was the heyday of the franchise, and this year's big feature was a soundtrack curated by Jay-Z. Which NBA 2K entry was the best? Let me know in the comments below. Scribble Scribblenauts Unlimited allowed players to make almost anything appear in the game simply by typing it in, a popular puzzle series at the time. Sing Party lives up to its premise by allowing players to live out their crooner fantasy with the included USB microphone. Skylanders Giants was the latest in the Toys to Life series, which encouraged players to buy up as many character figurines as possible. How many of you guys still have yours? Transformers Prime, the game, as the name implies, is based on the cartoon of the same name, a fairly straightforward beat-em-up. Wipeout 3 is in fact not the futuristic racing franchise, but based on the American game show where contestants slip and fall during physical challenges, or wipe out as it were. Your Shape Fitness Evolved 2013 isn't Wii Fit. There's no balance board. Instead, it focuses entirely on the Wiimote, and critics weren't all entirely convinced of that premise. Now, Assassin's Creed 3 has to be the third Assassin's Creed game, right? Nope, not even close. But it was a send-off story for the main protagonist, Desmond Miles. Batman Arkham City Armored Edition was a new version of Arkham City with extra abilities like electric gloves. Neat. FIFA 13 is yet another entry in the long-running franchise, later replaced by EA's FC series. This year's game had a mixed reputation for its arcade-style gameplay. Mass Effect 3 Special Edition is a truly bewildering release, the final entry in the trilogy where every decision mattered in the previous two games that never released on the Wii U. Like a great football game, New Super Mario Bros. U widens the gap between Madden with a total of 7 console launches, and a darn fun 2D platformer too. Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge is a better version of a disappointing sequel. In fact, this version can now be found on different consoles. Nintendo Land was the big attempt at a killer app, creating an amusement park full of minigames starring classic Nintendo characters. And you know what? It was kind of fun. Tekken Tag Tournament 2 Wii U Edition is an absolutely broken version of a good fighting game, but the kind of broken that the FGC likes. Can you believe it? It's the second time we're seeing a Warriors game at a launch with Warriors Orochi 3 Hyper, although technically this is their crossover series. Zombie U was one of the most touchpad-heavy games at launch, with a complex inventory system right on the screen. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 was an attempt at making Wii U multiplayer popular, but even one of the best Call of Duties couldn't make that happen. Sports Connection is yet another attempt to fill the Wii Sports hole, except this one didn't go over nearly as well with critics. Tank 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 was a time and a place, and that was the early 2010s and in the arcades, as this Wii U port didn't really meet fan expectations. Rabbids Lands is now the second time we've seen these crazy guys running amok, and of course they're taking the amusement park idea too, those wackos. Epic Mickey 2 The Power of 2 was not a well-received port of this cartoon platformer, thanks in large part to its subpar performance and presentation. Man, those last few were kinda negative, so thankfully Sonic and All-Star Racing Transformed is a fan-favorite kart racer and shows how much Sega has supported Nintendo launches. And the only game that Japan got on launch day that the West didn't was Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, which was honestly pretty neat, simply because it was a handheld game, now on a home console. Okay, check in. Well, the MVP is clear so far. Mario is now day and date with 7 different console generations, across 3 different decades. But the sports game Madden is oh so close, with 5 entries. And let's give a nod to those crazy rabbits for appearing for the second time. But of course, we only have one more generation to go, so will these patterns hold? And will Call of Duty remember to show up? We're finally here, the final stop on the list, and for only the second time, we're looking at Zelda and Breath of the Wild. Seriously, is there an echo in this room? Cause surely, this has to be the best Nintendo launch game ever. Answer that in the comments below, please. Something tells me no one is gonna pick 1-2 Switch, but it is a pretty neat little party game with a surprising live-action focus. Disgaea 5 Complete was a dream come true for JRPG fans, as this game had an absolute boatload of gameplay. Dragon Quest Heroes 1+2 was a repackaging of the Musou-style adaptations of the Dragon Quest series. Can we count this as the third Warriors game? I don't think so. I Am Setsuna is honestly a great little JRPG, with a gorgeous piano soundtrack. Seriously, go listen to it next time you want to feel something. Nobunaga's Ambition Sphere of Influence was the historic strategy series well into double digits, and a darn good entry. From downtown, Puyo Puyo Tetris brings Tetris back to the launch lineup for the first time since the original Game Boy in 1989, which is rather surprising. Super Bomberman R is one of the first entries in this long-running puzzle action series after several years on the shelf. And Just Dance 2017 is in fact not the 2017 release of the game, but an annual entry, and the second appearance at Nintendo launches. And lastly, Skylanders Imaginators makes for a second entry by the franchise, at least when it comes to Nintendo launches. But sadly, Sadly, this Toys to Life franchise has since ended. Alright, we've gone through every single game available in Japan and North America on release date for every single Nintendo generation launch. Let's rack them up and see what makes for the definitive Nintendo lineup, at least if the numbers are to be believed. First and foremost, we have Mr. Driller. He only showed up twice, but he'll forever live in our hearts. Next, we have Skylanders, a franchise that burned brightly but briefly and likely won't see a return, at least not for the foreseeable future. WarioWare, not Wario, but WarioWare has become a staple for Japanese launches, or it was at a point, with 2 games on the DS and Wii launch. After that, we have Just Dance, a franchise that requires so little input, yet delivers on exactly what it promises. Kids love it, and it'll probably outlive us all. Let's not forget Excite Bike and Excite Truck, which makes for 2 Nintendo launch title appearances. And even without counting Dragon Quest Heroes, cause let's face it, that's more Dragon Quest than straight Muso, the Koei Tecmo Warriors franchise would count for 2, with Samurai and Orochi 3. And we gotta count Rayman Advance and Rayman 3D. Despite being remakes, that's gonna be 2 appearances for the limbless one. And yes, those pesky rabbits made 2 appearances, one bearing Rayman's name. We're not gonna give that to him. One of the fastest racing games of all time, F-Zero was speeding around on the SNES and Game Boy Advance. Zelda only shows up twice, but it makes it count, with Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild being major launch sales hits. Tetris showed up twice, once all on its own to completely revolutionize puzzle game design, and again to do battle with Puyo Puyo. Now I'm gonna count Wii Sports with baseball in the general Nintendo lineage and mark that down for 3. Pilot Wings overcomes the haters and places 3 times. Not bad for a franchise that's always had a mixed reputation. Tony Hawk and his aerial maneuvers have skated right into the 3rd spot. Cause honestly, who doesn't love playing a bit of Tony Hawk? Speaking of extreme sports, Super Monkey Ball is up for at least 3 appearances, making it a modern Nintendo staple. But now we jump up to the major leagues with the Madden franchise appearing for a total of 5 times over multiple generations. It's kinda crazy, cause today, there's absolutely no Madden on Nintendo platforms, period. Here's hoping Switch 2 changes that. But who are we kidding? The MVP of Nintendo is undoubtedly Super Mario, with a grand total of 7 console launches. It's safe to say if there's a new Nintendo console launch, you got a 50-50 chance of a new Mario game being there. This humble plumber has helped Nintendo secure multiple generations of both sales and critical reputation. And if the attendance record is anything to go by, it won't be the last time we see our mustache friend. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. How about letting us know in the comments below which game series you'd like to see in Nintendo's console lineups? Did any omissions like Pokemon surprise you? And what's the very best Nintendo launch game ever? Chat back with us in the comments below, keep clicking around here at Game Rants, and we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody!